Hello, this is Bunting, and today I'm going to show you how to mix and master your bass tracks to utmost perfection, or at least how I like to do it, right? And on top of that, new video out. Link in description. I would appreciate your support. Hope you enjoy it, guys, and all that jazz. Okay, so this was sent in by a friend, Andrew Lazarus, in the Discord. Join the Discord, also link in description, right? So kind of him, right? So how would one go about mixing and mastering it, okay? The first thing to do, or at least if I reduce my chaotic process down to a few steps, the first thing is organize. And by organize, I mean use this amazing thing called groups. Ableton has them, a few other DAWs do, right? And the way to group is take all your tracks in one style, for example. So these are all vocal tracks. Click Control on each one you want in the group, and then hit Control G. I don't know what just happened there. Hit Control G. Okay? And now you have this lovely group. You can solo the group on its own so you can hear how all these elements are meshing together. You can name it whatever you want. You can name it vocal, and you can process the whole group at once. So now the whole group just destroys your ears. It's really amazing what technology has brought us, right? But go track by track and do that, you know. So we have a vocal group, we have our guitar group, right? We have all our bass group, right? Except the boy did something I don't like, and that's he mixed his mid basses with his sub bass, right? So I would go in, have a mid bass group and a sub bass group. So let's just name the sub bass and name this group mid bass, right? And the next thing you do once it's organized is cut out everything, just everything completely. No, cut out the lows and everything except your sub. You know, because the bass is so important, you don't want to make the sub bass unclear or just muddy up your mix unnecessarily. So I'm taking this EQ, I turned it to this steep slope here, and I'm dragging it up to about like 130, 122-ish. That'll do. And I'm just going to put it on everything that isn't the sub bass, right? And also isn't the kick. Okay? So we can go in, actually group these together since they aren't grouped, right? Okay. Side and sub bass. Nope, we want the sub on that. Go down to our guitar, cut out everything here, put it before our effects. Same thing here, and we're solid, right? Now, the final step in organizing after you've cut out all the lows is having a group of your groups, right? So here we have our drums. Group everything that isn't your drums together, and we'll name it not drums. This is where your sidechain will go, okay? So you might be asking, okay, ya boy Bunting. You don't call me ya boy, you just call me Bunting, okay? How do you do that, okay? This is how you do it. Watch. Compressor. Put it on the not drums group, right? And click this little button and sidechain. That's the magic button. But we're not done yet. What are we sidechaining from, you ask? Well, the kick. And here's our kick. Let's name it kick so it's easier to track. Kick. Okay? Audio from none other than kick. Now, if we solo this and click this little waveform here, we can see what's going on. As you see, as is, we can see our kick signal going through, except it's not loud enough to trigger our sidechain. So we can either turn our kick signal louder or just turn up the gain here. Now it's plenty loud to trigger our sidechain, which you can see in that dip. But it's not steep enough, right? How do we make it steeper? Go to this little knee knob here. Knee knob? I mean, whatever. And drag this to the left and drag it up. This essentially turns our ratio up and threshold down, which makes it so it's way steeper. We can turn down our threshold even more so it cuts out everything completely. You can mess with your ratio, which essentially makes it less steep. You can keep your release up to make it so it releases super slowly or super snappy. You want it snappier, and you can make it attack so it fades in slower or quicker. You want a bit of attack to have it a bit smooth so it doesn't really click, right? But the thing is, this is not a clean sidechain at all. If you listen, the kick hits, but the rest takes a minute to come back, right? How do we clean this up? The first thing we could do is just clean up our kick. You can drag this back on one-shot mode, fade it out. Now it's quicker. Except that's still not clean. So what we're gonna do is literally just cut it all off. So it's just this click. Okay, just a click. And we don't even need to hear it. We can turn it off. But what we're gonna do is use this for our sidechain. We won't hear it, but the sidechain will. The sidechain hears all. No, it doesn't hear all, it just hears the click. Now look how snappy that is, because it's using this tiny click. Okay, now we can shape it to our liking. Now it's much cleaner, much snappier, and lovely. The reason for sidechain is so no matter what's happening in the mix, your kick is punching through, right? And another thing you could do is sidechain your snare, but I usually don't do that. I only do that sometimes. So I'm not going to go over. It's the same principle, except you can turn on this EQ and basically say, okay, everything above 200 or so frequency is what I want sidechained. Or you can turn it on anything. So now it only sidechains things below this range. It's quite magical and convenient, right? But yeah, that's kind of frequency-based sidechain if you don't want everything sidechained. But usually I sidechain everything with the kick especially. Okay, so sidechain done, lows cleaned. What next? Let's get our drums knocking, right? So my general process for getting anything knocking, drums especially, goes like this. Number one, is the sample actually good? In this case, is that a good sample, guys? Vote yes in the comments. Say yes or no in the comments. It's alright. It's not great though. I don't hear that and go like, dang, that's a good thing. We need pure gold samples. And by pure gold samples, I mean my samples. You can get them on my website, link in description. Solid kicks right here. I'll just listen to that, right? Okay, so much better kick. Then we can get to polishing. Now let's check our snare before we polish though. The snare isn't bad. In fact, I kind of like it. You know, I find that Ableton stock kicks are kind of weak, but the snares and highs aren't that bad, right? They just aren't that bad. But this does have a bit of a tail. So what I'm going to do is just drag this, make sure it's on one-shot mode, and fade it out. Now it's way snappier, way cleaner. I dig it. Let's say this wasn't punchy enough for us, right? So how about we go in and make it punchier? How would you do that? Get a drum bus, right? Ableton Effects drum bus. It's amazing. I'd like to turn my drive down, damp up, and decay down. Damp, as you can tell, dampens the sound. Drive distorts it. You can distort it even more, even less. Decay adds a boom. You see, but you don't want that, and it kind of adds a weird artifact if it's not on like 0 and completely off. You can also shape it with this transient, make it a little snappier, make it a little clickier in the beginning, or just leave it as is, right? But it's great for really any drum sample. Anything you want punchy, not even drums, you can throw this on. You can add it to this, you can duplicate it, except I've already drum bussed and compressed the ever-living shit out of these samples, so that wouldn't do a whole lot. If you don't want drum bus, or you want something a little different, another way to make them punch is some compression. Right, this is the polishing stage, by the way. I just like this bass punch preset because this high attack and slow release really just, it makes it louder at the beginning and quieter at the end, which is just what you need to create that punchy effect. You can even add multiple of those, right? Now here's a trick. So let's say, just like the way things are sitting in our mix, we want things louder, right? We want things louder and prouder. But as you see, it's like, eventually it's going to start clipping, right? The solution to that is soft clip, right? Drum bus has soft clip built in, but if you just get a glue compressor, right? Whoops, not there. Glue compressor, and turn the makeup up, you can basically turn it as loud as you want, right? Beyond what you would be able to turn up in here and here, right? Without saturating it either. And this can be used for drums, for anything, right? To get your levels right. And also you can turn on soft clip, so no matter how loud it is, it won't go into the red zone. right? Which you don't usually want, but you can get away with it, you know, just use your ear. Your ear is king ultimately. But now, as you see, we're all snappy. Alright, after getting a bit of polish on our sound, I want the levels sitting approximately right. So just proportionate to the rest of this, I'm thinking the snare a bit quieter, kick a bit louder. Okay, see, and I'm just using my ear, nothing else, just my ear to estimate where I want to get it, right? And as you can see on this drum group, you can add some extra processing. Right here, I'm just gonna add, I just add full parallel. That's all I add. See, that just makes that kick especially knock. I like that preset. Okay, so what are our steps that I'm just like completely ignoring? So first of all, pick a good sample or make sure the sound's good if it's like a bass synth or whatever. Then you're gonna polish the sound with like OTT, compression, saturation, and delay stuff, right? And then get your rough levels, right? And after that, I would probably go in and EQ, right? So to EQ, see, and this was sneaky. It has a bit of lows in the sound that we don't want. For snares, you can EQ out pretty much anything below this fundamental, where it just dukes. If I want it a bit brighter or a bit dimmer, I can go and do that. Or if there's any gross frequencies, you can go sweep through like so with a high Q. Let's say this frequency is really annoying us, just EQ that out. In fact, I think I could use a bit of that. Why not, you know? Just generally do that, right? And then we can go back through and add some stereo, right? So stereo widening is just excellent. This has been a long video for just the drums, I'm sorry, but just wider, right? A lot of times I don't do widening on my drums, but I do it on my synths, right? Okay, so let's go down to our synths actually and demonstrate some more of this using the same process, okay? Just skip to a synthy part, come on, okay. Synth. Okay, so first thing, make sure the sound's good. It sounds good to me, you know. A lot of times you don't want like crazy weird sounds if they're not solid, right? But this EQ is kind of sussing me out, right? I mean, this reverb. I can't even speak anymore, right? Because we can add this after our effects, right? So let's process it first, then add our reverb. So the first thing, how about I just polish it with some classic OTT. As you can see, I can't even stick my own rules. OTT makes any bass sound crispier and more beautiful. So does saturator, right? I like that before OTT. Now it's just way more harmonically rich, right? But as you can tell, like it's getting a little ugly, right? So let's throw some EQ on there and pick out these gross frequencies. Oh. Okay, that's a little too much for me. So high Q, just drag the gain down. It's already much nicer on the ears, right? Now, if your stuff isn't sticking out in the mix no matter what, or you just want it to be wider and more present, or whatever, just add a bit of infected mushroom wider. You know, that gets the job done. Either that, now it's beautifully wide. You know, don't be afraid to use some stereo widening. You know, it can really work wonders for things that you can't seem to get stand out in the mix, making them stand out, right? Another way you can make things wider, just a bit of reverb. And also a bit of delay, right? Just a bit of delay. This is called the Haas effect. You can turn the time low and on ping pong. See, now it's in both your ears, and it's amazing, right? but wider kind of does all those things for you. And same thing here. Is this sound alright? Yeah, sounds decent to me. Right? Except, let's go in. How about, I hear some muddy frequencies. Be careful with these mids, right? Doesn't do a whole lot for the sound. So I'm just going to cut out these mids. You know, add OTT on it. I turned the time up because, or else it sounds kind of messy like that. And you don't need to do this to everything, just anything that isn't clear enough or you think can be better. This thing, I'm not liking this though. Ew. Because that distortion, I just don't think it does anything to the sound, you know, besides make it sound like it's just distorting unnecessarily. And to make this crisper, I'm gonna go in, for one, put this OTT before a filter, right? And also make it open up a little wider, because if you have it opening up so low, it's just all in the mid-range frequencies, which generally aren't the most pleasing frequencies to the ear. And that sounds much better to me. Now that we polish these sounds out, we can just go in and get all the levels about right. But if you don't want to get all the levels about right, just compress the shit out of the group. Just get a catch peaks preset. Alright, memes aside, compression on the group can really make everything just sound as a cohesive whole if you have a lot of similar sounds, right? Okay, so let's go to this guitar group and further work our magic, right? So as you see, there's hella mids in this, which kind of muddy up the mix, right? So the way to fix this is just cut them out. Also, if there's any stereo information, here's a life hack. Put on MS, and you can go in and select S and scoop it out in stereo, which is also great. You definitely don't want a lot of stuff in stereo, but that just sounds way cleaner to me, cutting out some of those mids. And let's turn this up a bit louder in the mix too. And go to these vocals and give it kind of the same treatment. Less mids. You don't want less mids on everything, but if the mids aren't offering a whole lot to the sound, they can be very detrimental, so I just scoop them out a lot of the time. Okay, solid, and let's just like turn up the level on this a bit. And maybe like a bit of wider on this too, because wider makes everything good. Also, this group could use a lot of compression to even out the dynamics, because there's a lot of sounds going on a lot of different volumes. I want it to sound more like a cohesive whole. Sounds much better already. Okay, now I think we've kind of did a processing on our stuff, right? We got the levels at about a rough estimate. Now time for this master track, right? What goes on in the master, right? Mostly just getting your track loud enough with some extra finishing touches, right? Ultimately, all you only need is maybe a bit of like EQ, just like brightening it up. It doesn't always need this, but sometimes it benefits from having a bit brighter sound. You know, if not EQ, you can also throw on some multi-band compression, right? Which, as you can see, it's doing a favor. Multi-band compression's nice. Just like we did in mixing, just pretend your master track is just another sound in the mix that you want to sound good. So what parts of your master track sound good? I don't know, these mids don't sound very good or useful to me, so I'm just going to give it a little scoop here, right? And these highs sound pretty beautiful to me. So just a little boost in the highs. Now you can also go through. How about we just add another EQ for this, right? Also go through and sweep for any gross frequencies. See? I don't see any extremely piercing frequencies, but you really have to be careful with them, especially with weird bass sounds, you know, which we love to use. Just go through, sweep through, cut anything out. If you have the Soothe plugin, it does all this for you, but if not, you're stuck manually. Right? But let's, with our little master rack here, let's see what's going on. See, look, already, look how much more polished and brighter that sounds. It's really that simple. You don't need ozone and a lot of crazy stuff, right? Another thing, like I mentioned, this mid-side EQ can be really nice. So let's put it on mid-side mode, get the sides. Ooh. And one thing before I forget, I'm going all over the place. Utility, right? Utility, and make sure bass is mono. Because if bass isn't mono, it won't hit the sub right and it will just sound super muddy. Let's scoop out a bit more mids on the sides, because scooping out the mids on the sides just makes everything sound way cleaner. Okay. Now jumping around back to the mix, because I'm just crazy and can't stay focused, right? This is just a respace, right? But if you see, this little harmonic up here goes higher than the sub at times, which I don't like. Can just make things sound muddier and make it not slap as hard as it could. So what I'm gonna do is just say forget you to this like unison thing. You can either do that or you can go in, EQ it out so it's not interfering as much. Another thing is, you definitely don't want any lows being delayed, right? In fact, let me just get rid of these delays and reverbs. You do not want your sub frequencies and maybe mids at times to be delayed, because you don't need that. You know, you just don't need that, and it'll just mess up your mix. It'll make it methy and gross, right? So as for your sub, right, let's make this a better sub, beefier. See, on this it had more high frequencies than it had actual sub. So if you go in on Vital or here in Serum, hit this pencil, you can draw on the harmonics to make your sub fatter. Generally you want something that kind of looks like this for the fatter result, but experiment, listen in your headphones, listen in your sub, and all that jazz. A lot of people recommend adding saturation, but the thing is, all saturation is doing is adding harmonics, right? And why use saturation or overdrive when you can just draw them in yourself for the cleanest, fattest sub on earth? It just sounds way fatter now and cleaner because we don't have that high harmonic EQ. Right? Okay, back to the master. Before, I was so rudely distracted by that atrocious thing right there. Andrew, do better, right? Of course it's subjective, but generally you want a clean sub for bass music, right? Next thing, getting it loud enough, okay? Use none other than mastering preset, make it loud, right? You can use a limiter, but I find it's kind of iffy. I like compression better. Pretty much the rule of thumb for loudness, you want your sub and kick hitting at about -6 on the master. Oh yeah, and by the way, this plugin, which you need to know, is Spectrum. Okay, Spectrum. That's it. Boring video, I know. But yeah, you see -6, there it is. So let's actually just go to our sub and solo it on its own. Okay, it's hitting about -6, great, wonderful. Okay, now let's go to our other low end powerhouse, this kick. And let's see where it's hitting. Right under 6. So what I'm going to do, you can either just raise the volume of it, except I think it's already pretty loud in the mix. So all I'm going to do is EQ, just boost the low a bit. See where it's hitting now. A bit more. Just a bit, teeny bit more. Okay. I'm just gonna say that's good enough because it's right below 6, like literally right below, and our sub is barely hitting above it. In fact, we can just decrease our sub volume. Okay, we're good. Once your sub is hitting at -6, that gives you liberty to go in. I just use multiband dynamics a lot of the time because it's the simplest way. You could just go in and pretty much boost your highs until it clips. You know, boost your, not your mids so much, but your highs. But see, it's already kind of clipping, which kind of means your mids and highs are plenty loud. But don't make the mistake of getting your sub up and just neglecting the loudness of your mids and highs, because I do that in my tracks sometimes. I'm going to need to remaster my ones I've released, honestly. But don't make that mistake, right? But as you can see, you really don't need much on the master, right? Just EQ, you know, like clean up a bit in the mud, you know, make the bass mono, you know, compress it a bit, clean up the sides, you know, add a bit of high boost, and most importantly, compress it all at the end and get it up to around -6 hitting on the sub, right? And you're pretty much done. You know, I know this was all over the place, but that's how mixing and mastering can be, all over the place. But if you're still watching, just a rule of thumb: for one, organize it; for two, pick good sounds or design good sounds; for three, polish it, you know, OTTs, saturators, reverb, or whatever you need. Be wise with all that stuff. Next thing, EQ it, get out the unnecessary frequencies, boost the good ones, don't boost the bad ones, decrease the bad ones, and lastly, get your levels at a rough estimate, and then get your levels at a tight estimate. And once you're at about this phase, I would just go in and tweak your levels, maybe even on your groups, until it all just meshes together like you hear in your head, you know, or whatever sounds best to you. Because ultimately, there is no one size fits all. This is just a method to do it, you know, because ultimately our ear is the boss, and our ear is what decides what's good and what's not. But I hope this gave you, although hectic, a basis on how to mix and master your tracks, you know. This approach generally works for any music, not just bass music. But yeah, it's worth a lot of experimenting and really experience. You know, you get better over time, even though it seems kind of straightforward. It's not. You'll learn that quickly. But anyways, I'm done talking. You can get lessons from me in the description. I have sample packs. I have presets you can buy. You can also support me on Patreon, get all my video project files and video presets and all that jazz. Check out my new tune, all that jazz. Leave a like, comment, and be sure to subscribe if you enjoyed. And yeah, comment any suggestions for future videos or any questions you have. And yeah, bit of a hectic video, but the content is there. All right, this is your boy Bunting. Thanks for your support. Thanks for watching, and peace out.